to conserve what is good, and to have change. Change more of a gradual nature than a revolutionary nature. We know that our own revolution of 1776 was a conservative revolution. It was led by well-educated people, men of property, generally men in those days. Abigail Adams would certainly qualify as an early feminist. She objected very much to a certain newspaper saying that her husband John had a fat horse. She said that she knew he had a fat horse, but she didn't want to see the newspapers publishing that. But the people who founded this country, they were steeped in the classics. They knew about Rome. They knew about Athens. They knew about all of this, right? We have people in power today who don't even know how many states we have. And they don't know what the consequences of spending money, overspending money at the rate of $4 billion a day is going to do. Now back to this talk at Douglas. Obviously, I was talking to 16, 15, 16, 17-year-old students. It was not a partisan discussion. I did not want to bore them with all of that. But I talked about GDP, gross domestic product growth, what goes into GDP, unemployment, inflation, interest rates, taxes, all of those things. And of course, the massive federal deficit. One of the things I like about young people is they're so sharp when it comes to thinking logically to the next point. So we'll forget my discussion about GDP growth and all the rest of that stuff. We'll save that for the Q&A because I'd like to talk for me just a few more minutes, and then we'll go into that. But I said in my chat, I said, these politicians in Washington, I told them how much money was being spent, how much was being added to the national debt. Told them about what's happening to Greece and Italy and Spain and Ireland and Portugal. And I've been to all of those countries and done business in all of them as well. I said, the politicians in Washington are spending this money because they're pushing it onto your generation. I think I may have said I'm 68 years of age, which I am. I'm going to be okay, and if I'm not, at least I've had a great life for 68 years. But you folks, you young people out there, you're the ones that they're buying votes today for to push this debt onto. That's one thing I said. But this one young woman just made me really giggle. She said, Dr. Quinn, she said, why can't we pass the debt on to the next generation? Well, I kept a serious face, and I said, because by the time you reach young adulthood, that deficit, that accumulated debt, which is $15 trillion today, will be maybe twice that or more. We can't keep running deficits of $1 trillion a year. Because the simple arithmetic is that at some point, who's going to loan us money? What will the interest rates be? What will the inflation rate be? And that's what concerns me the most about the impending train wreck we are watching in slow motion. We all know it's coming if we continue our current ways. You can't keep running deficits of 8 and 9 and 10% of the GDP every year in peacetime. We did it during World War II to defeat the Axis powers. But we've never done it in peacetime. Even Franklin Delano Roosevelt didn't run deficits of 8 to 9 to 10% of the GDP. And if we want a little symbolism, Franklin Delano Roosevelt won World War II with a White House staff of 132 people. The incumbent has 1,500 people with all kinds of titles, making huge amounts of money, getting bonuses and raises. The First Lady alone has a bigger staff than Abraham Lincoln had to win the Civil War. We have a staggeringly overbloated, corrupt, inefficient, wasteful government. And none of this should have happened. It should not be allowed to happen in the future. And that's the importance of a lot of grassroots movements, like the Tea Party, and others as well. I have a link to the Constitution. According to our cousin Betty, your Matkinses, and Betty Matkins was a Quinn, family genealogist. One of my ancestors signed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, James Wilson, only one of 6 who signed both documents. Peter Nutstein was a lieutenant in George Washington's army, a son of the American Revolution, among other things. My great-grandfather fought for Abraham Lincoln for 4 years in the Civil War, out of Iowa. Came back, backed up his 6 sons and daughter, and moved to Meade County as a pioneer. So my roots in this country go very, very deep. I care very much for the Constitution and for everything which has happened because of that great document, because of the Declaration of Independence, because of all of the things that we have done in this conservative revolution. When the incumbent the other day gave a speech in Kansas and took some quotes of Teddy Roosevelt totally out of context, you can take any sentence you want out of context, out of any document, and try to prove a point. What he left out was that Teddy Roosevelt, for whom my grandfather worked in Medgar, North Dakota, talked about the rights of property, the rights of capital. Teddy Roosevelt was no socialist. Teddy Roosevelt was a progressive for his time. When he gave that speech in 1910, we had no income tax. The sentiment for a progressive income tax was rising. When Teddy made the mistake, I think in retrospect, of running 1912 against Taft and Woodrow Wilson, big mistake for Teddy, although he came in second. Taft only carried two states that year. Teddy Roosevelt was on the right track on so many issues. But there was no income tax whatsoever in 1910. In 1913, they put an income tax. And the tax brackets were, get this, 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%, and 7%. And only 5% of the American people paid any taxes whatsoever. You could put all of your taxes on 2 pages in 1913. That's how simple it was. The only people who paid income taxes were the Andrew Carnegies and J.P. Morgans and people and John D. Rockefellers and so forth, right? That's fair. We'd come out of a period of the Gilded Age where there were a lot of excesses. Where a lot of the very rich, like the Astors, would have dinners for their dogs with diamond necklaces, right? Probably a good thing to have a progressive income tax, up to 7%. Today, of course, we have a taxation system which is so heavily weighted toward this so-called 1%, that 47% of the American people don't pay any taxes whatsoever. The top 1% pay 38% of the taxes. The top 5% pay 58% of the taxes. And on and on and on. So when somebody gets up and talks about fairness, is it fair for nearly half of the American people to pay no taxes whatsoever? Well, in 1913, 95% didn't, right? So it's okay for Morgan and Carnegie and Rockefeller and Duke and all of the others, the super rich, to pay the taxes. But today, it is inequitable to take the class of people, I'm talking about the economic class and income class of people, and say, you're going to pay all the taxes, and everybody else is going to be takers of those taxes. Let's talk about millionaires and billionaires for a minute. Just 2 or 3 things about billionaires. There are about 1,200, I've got the exact figures somewhere at home from books, about 1,200 billionaires in the entire world. Or a few less than the population of Lemon, South Dakota. I've been in Lemon for a few years, used to live up Faith. Gordon's parents, my parents were friends from that area. There are only 1,200 in the whole world. Now, some of them are rather flamboyant, like a few of them who think that they should be paying more taxes. Go ahead. But there are only 1,200 of them. Guess what? There are only 433 of them that live in the United States of America. There are more billionaires in Moscow, 79 to be exact according to Forbes, than there are in New York City, 55 to be exact, right? So only about a third of the billionaires in the entire world live in the United States at all. And 433, well, that'd be less than the population of Hill City, wouldn't it, right? They can all show up at Mike Bercio's next chamber of annual meeting.
He'd like that.
Yeah, he would like that.
But anyway.